If you haven't heard already, Blackmagic have announced their new Pyxis 12K, along with a huge number of other products at the same time, as well as DaVinci Resolve 20. There are so many incredible updates across all their different products, including the camera, including DaVinci Resolve, that there's no way I could cover it all in this one video. So when it comes to the Pyxis 12K, we already knew it was coming before they announced it today. Just yesterday or the day before at NAB, where posters have been put up, they were very largely advertising that the Pyxis 12K was coming, and it was using the same 12K LF sensor that is in the Ursa 12K LF. That in itself is massive, because that 12K sensor, of course, was designed by Blackmagic, and it has that RGBW sensor tech in it, allowing you to combine pixels together to create different resolutions from the same sensor. So what does that mean? Well, it's a 12K camera, but you don't need to shoot 12K and still get Blackmagic RAW. It will combine the pixels together to create an 8K picture, or even go down to 4K by combining even more pixels together. This way you have all the advantages of shooting RAW, but also you still get to keep the entire image. You're not cropping in like you do on other cameras when you want to shoot RAW. And I think that is a massive game changer, especially at the lower end of the market. Yes, we've seen the 17K and the 12K Ursas, which is very impressive, and you can see how they would get used on big sets, where the large data rates isn't a problem. However, there's a lot of people that buy these sort of cameras, especially the loyal Blackmagic users over the years, who want to be able to use these cameras, but unfortunately, often that is just too much data. Even 6K, I think, for a lot of people was pushing it for, say, a small corporate video. What's nice about this is you can pick the resolution and frame rate that you need for the particular job you're doing. On top of that, this is shooting open gate as well, so that extra height is extremely handy when you want to be able to produce vertical content as well. In terms of the overall design of this Pyxis 12K, it's pretty much the same as the Pyxis 6K. They've just gone and taken the same body and of course put that new sensor tech inside. That's quite expected from Blackmagic. They do it all the time with their other cameras, and it's great to see that they've taken a really nice design and upgraded from it. Now, I think what's really fascinating about the switch to this sensor is the vertical integration and that ecosystem that Blackmagic can build. If you watch the full live stream, you realize the ecosystem is now absolutely huge. This is a camera that can work really well, obviously in a more cinema setting, but also great in a broadcast setup or a live stream or a multicam. There's so many different scenarios that this camera can be used because of all the integrated tech that they have across the board with their hardware and software. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the camera that they always wanted to release, and that the Pixus 6K was perhaps a stopping gap in between. Maybe they wanted to get this sensor in this camera much sooner, but unfortunately, the way the technology was developing, they just couldn't get it out quick enough, but they still really wanted to release a box camera as soon as possible. That would explain why it's come so soon after the Pixus 6K. I think the 6K, although it is a great design and there's been a lot of positive things about it, people were put off by perhaps the more sideways push of the sensor tech inside it. Yes, it was full frame, but you were having slower frame rates than the 6K Pro in the past, and it didn't really feel like a big upgrade from previous Blackmagic models. This now, with this newer sensor, I think is a massive upgrade. I didn't expect them to include it because you'd think they want to keep it exclusive to the Ursa for just a bit longer, but I have to say I'm glad that they have included it, especially at that price. It's coming in at about £5,000 here in the UK and currently $5,000 in the US, but of course that may change with all the tariffs that are being added on. Although the Pixis 12K is a massive announcement along with many other features they've added to their hardware and software, I think the biggest shock of the entire live stream was the announcement, and a very understated announcement, that they're now including autofocus on their newer cameras. This is huge because suddenly this changes, I think, the mindset of whether you should go and get a Blackmagic camera or not. Before, no matter how great the Blackmagic cameras were, no matter how much stuff they would chuck in these cameras and amazing value for money you'd get from them, there'd always be that little bit at your back of your mind saying, yeah, it's great, but they're not giving us the latest tech that you're seeing from the competition like Sony, Canon, Nikon, and others. That was one of the big things that I think was missing in the camera. Not that it's vital, not that it's really important for everyone, But I think the way that Blackmagic position their cameras is always been very much at the more affordable end of the market. It's people who can't really afford to go out and buy a Sony FX6, for example. And for those people, although they were really enjoying the integration of Blackmagic RAW and all of the menu system that's really nice to use and just the general functions you get and the resolutions that you get out of their cameras, it was always frustrating that in more run and gun situations, they were slightly falling behind. Autofocus, even if you think you're a wonderful cinematographer and you don't need it, there are definitely use cases where it is a brilliant tool to have. Why not have that tool in the box if you can have it? And now it's there. It's in all of their cameras going forward. Now we'll have to wait and see whether it is really good. Is it as good as the competition? They mentioned that it's using some sort of new AI chip, which they already included in the Blackmagic 6K Cine camera, which is quite a surprise they included in that one. I didn't expect that at all. However, we'll have to see whether that tech is actually good enough, or there might be some limitations interpreting it through an AI chip versus a proper autofocus system that perhaps we've seen developed in the competition. Another really interesting update for this camera is how they really want to integrate it with the broadcast world, and that's why they've announced new top handle EVF combo along with a new interesting side handle that basically turns the Pyxis into a traditional handycam. Now, it's kind of amazing. We haven't seen anyone attempt this in a long time. Sony did in the early days of large sensor cameras. They did release a couple of cameras with this sort of design, but very much everyone moved away from that design when they brought out future cinema cameras. So it's kind of cool that Blackmagic have figured out a way of being able to adapt their camera into this style while still being a box camera for different setups. This is why we wanted a box camera from Blackmagic all along, because it allows you to create really interesting different designs from the same body. Now, I have no idea how good that viewfinder will be. I've probably got a sneaky suspicion they're using the same viewfinder that is in the viewfinder you can buy for the pocket cameras. That is absolutely fine. It does the job, but certainly nowhere near the quality as the cinema viewfinder that you can buy for the Pixus and Ursa cameras. But for those who are running and gunning, this could be more than good enough. And now they've got that side handle with the record button and all running through USB-C, as well as that USB-C extension module as well, which is very interesting in terms of how that could be used in future upgrades as well. This really does open up some interesting options for the broadcast world. The one criticism we will have here is there's still not really great power zoom lenses for cameras like this. Certainly in the L mount there is nothing. They're showing it off with the Canon zoom 18-135 with its little adapter on the bottom. That does exist, it's existed for a long time, but it's not a great lens and most people probably would avoid something like that. It may be good enough for the news and broadcast world, but I do think we need to see someone develop a much better lens for a setup like this. Something that's not necessarily new, but certainly shouldn't be overlooked, is the integration of Blackmagic Cloud, as well as just over the network connecting to this camera. This completely changes the way that you could use a camera on set. Suddenly now you can import your footage from the camera directly into Blackmagic Resolve, or you can do it over the cloud where it's going to be sending up the files to a remote editor. That is cool, and I can see certain cases where that is extremely useful, but I really like this idea of being able to actually send the footage straight into a timeline and start working off it straight away. What this allows you to do is to actually start editing and color grading the footage as the footage is coming in. If you're shooting somewhere, you can, rather than just looking at a monitor or playing back on the camera, suddenly you can play back actually on the timeline, applying your color grading as you go and really have a look at the footage that you're creating. That's really important for someone like myself where we're shooting a lot of interiors and I'll do a single shot and then I like to double check it looks good and I might make some adjustments to the scene. And if I could actually import all that footage into Resolve as we go, that would be very powerful. And I think that's going to be a really useful feature for a lot of people. So as you can tell, I am very excited by this camera, so much so I've already put my pre-order in for one. I did the same last year for the Pyxis, original Pyxis, and in the end I decided not to buy one. There was too many little things that just put me off. And one of them being that sensor was just not quite the upgrade I was looking for. It's great, but it felt definitely much more as a sideways step rather than pushing forward. This is very different. This is obviously a great modern new sensor that completely changes how this camera actually functions and what you can get out of it. Along with the other features they've added and updated as well, I really think this is a very powerful camera that makes it very difficult to compete with. There are pretty much no one else offering all these features in one particular camera setup, and now they have added that autofocus in there as well. That's one less kind of excuse to go for the competition. Before it was always a case of, yeah, they're great, but they're missing this. Now suddenly that's not so much the case. That said, there are a few features that I would like to have seen included that sadly haven't been, and well, that's the only small criticisms I guess you could make of this camera. First off, and I think the most biggest thing that we were all hoping for, there's still no built-in NDs in this camera. I kind of get it, it's limited space, and maybe really pushing it if you want to try and put full frame ND filters in a camera body this small, but it would have been nice to have seen it included. I think that would have been really ticking off the last box for me to make this a perfect camera. The screen on the side, of course, still doesn't flip out. That was one of my biggest criticisms of the previous Pyxis. Now, in the meantime, since they announced that, of course, you've now got the Pyxis monitor, which pretty much solves those problems. It's just like a better version of the monitors you get with the C400 or the FX6. But actually, it's a lot brighter, it's a lot bigger, and it's a lot sharper. So there, they've really solved that problem, and it's not such an issue like it was before. The single XLR is still a slightly odd choice, but maybe they just learned that most people aren't using two XLR inputs on their cameras nowadays. I think, though, the broadcast world might be slightly frustrated by the fact they haven't included a second XLR in the camera. The lack of HDMI is also still a little bit of a disappointment. Although it's not critical, I would like to have seen it just included on these cameras. A lot of people upgrading will already have HDMI monitors or wireless systems, and it would be nice if they could just carry on using those rather than having to upgrade to SDI systems. One final thing that might be disappointing to some people is the lack of ProRes in the camera. It was a feature that was always included on old Blackmagic cameras, and it seems like they've decided it's not worth spending the money on the license anymore. And perhaps it's to do with that new sensor tech as well, being so integrated with Blackmagic RAW. It just makes sense to focus in on that. It is frustrating because I know there's a lot of people out there that work with agencies who require ProRes RAW, and this just means you're going to have to transcode everything before sending to those clients. Yes, ProRes is great, was great, has been a really useful standard for many, many years. But technology moves on. We're changing the way we work now, and having it be RAW, which is smaller file sizes, is far greater and far more useful. So there you go, that is the Pyxis 12K. I think an absolutely game-changing camera. The inclusion of that new sensor, the inclusion of autofocus really does completely change, I think, the view of what Blackmagic are now. And I think it really does put a big challenge to all the other camera manufacturers. It's hard to justify a lot of other cameras now because of how good this Pyxis 12K on paper actually is. There's very few negatives about this camera. It's very difficult to argue why it wouldn't work in pretty much any case scenario. I'd love to hear your thoughts though. Is this a camera that you're going to pick up? Is it going to do everything you want it to do? And is it a good enough reason to upgrade or change from the current camera system that you are using? Because that is one thing. Things are definitely plateauing in terms of the technology, in terms of the image quality, and actually the output that we need to give to our clients. Do we need 12K, for example? Do we need all these bells and whistles that are being added to all of these cameras? They're all really great features, but perhaps we don't need to be upgrading all the time like we did in the past. If you liked this video, please like. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, as it massively helps me out, and I'll see you next time.